In an earlier episode, we brought in General Robert Spalding. He's a China expert. In fact, he was one of the China experts in the National Security Council. While he was there, though, he also worked on something that's critical to China and critical to the United States and our future, and we've talked about it before. It's 5G. Now, this is General Robert Spalding. He's got a new book that's just out, Stealth War: How China Took Over While America's Elite Slept. And while we talk about all the things China is doing, and that's trade and Confucius Institutes and it's Hollywood and economic war and all kinds of efforts, probably the most critical thing that they're working on, which means the most important thing for us to respond to, is 5G. Welcome back, General Spalding.
Great to be back. Thank you.
You know, what we talked about before was China in a broad sense. I'd like to narrow down and just talk about 5G. And I know you have expertise. When you were at the National Security Council, you were focused on this, and in fact, you were the force behind a paper that I got a hold of called Secure 5G, the Eisenhower National Highway System for the Information Age. Can you tell a little bit about why you were the driving force to have that paper written and the research behind it, and then what happened with it?
Yeah, as we're looking around the state of play for technology, our economy, you know, what China and the Chinese Communist Party were doing, I saw no graver threat to the United States than the ability for the Chinese Communist Party to essentially harvest our data and combine that with technologies that had come out in big data analysis, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and social networks and e-commerce and fintech. And really the confluence of all of those technologies were coming together. I had seen had come together already in China. Living as the defense attaché in Beijing, I had tried to, as much as possible, you know, live as a digital citizen in China so I could experience how pervasive, you know, what they were doing with technology was. And it really, quite frankly, if you live in China as a digital citizen, in other words, you have all the apps and services that they've created for their population, it is mind-blowing, and it far surpasses anything the United States does. In fact, most people don't carry cash there anymore. They just use their phone. They'll meet on the street. A vendor on the street will have a QR code for a product, and they'll just scan the QR code and they'll pay the money. You'll order your food online. You walk into the restaurant. They'll greet you by name because a camera recognizes you through facial recognition, and they'll hand you your food.
That's almost science fiction-like. So the technology that enables that, is that their 5G technology? Are they that advanced?
No, it's actually they're actually using 4G technology, but 5G technology really amps it up to the next level. So if you think of those mobile phones that I was talking about, you know, in China, there are a lot of iPhones, but there are also a lot of Huawei phones. Now, the iPhone was engineered to be a hardware and software integrated device that could protect your data, the data that was on the iPhone. It was encrypted and was meant to be only for your viewing. And the reason that was is because Apple was an American company. It was building American principles into its product. What's happening is that China figured out, you know, by building the second 4G network in the world and essentially allowing our economy to be the dominant 4G economy in the world, it really gave us an advantage in the business models, the app services and business models that ran that economy. They started in 2009 to essentially dominate that for 5G, and so they've stacked the standards bodies for 3GPP, which is the industry body for 5G. They've stacked they've promoted Huawei and ZTE as global champions across the world. They've invested in the technology because they want to win 5G. And the interesting thing about what I said about the Apple device being the platform, the mobile computing platform that you built app services and business models on, in 5G, the smartphone essentially fades into the background because the network becomes a platform that the app services and business models are built on. What does that mean? That means you're going to walk around the street. You may not even need to have a phone because There will be cameras that will recognize who you are. They'll recognize where you're going. There'll be microphones. You can say, I need an Uber, and an Uber will show up. It'll charge you account, and it'll take you where you want to go. You can order food that way. So really, when you think about, the apps that you have today, we're really talking about a 4G world. A 5G world means the world talks back to you.
Wow. And 5G is just essentially a new standard which is substantially faster. Tell us, how much faster is 5G versus 4G?
Well, no, it's not just faster. It takes the computing layer out of the device and puts it on the network. And so that means that rather than having to have a device to do computing, the network does the computing. That means all that data can be computed on the network. So you really just need a bunch of dumb devices. And there's so many dumb devices. Today on a 4G network, you have 10,000 devices per square mile. On a 5G network, you can have 3 million devices per square mile. So you can literally put devices everywhere. You can have robots, you can have sensors. All of those things will be working together, and most of that traffic will be machine-to-machine communication. A very small fraction of it will be, people talking on cell phones or looking at videos. So it's a completely different world that, probably is best, viewed by looking at some sci-fi movie, like Guardians of the Galaxy, in a very smart city, where essentially the city reacts to your desires.
Well, it sounds actually very convenient. So what's wrong with that? Why is that a potential threat?
Well, in that convenience, it also means that all of that data, because essentially the security standards are Chinese standards, that data is not secure. And so a nation state or just a hacker can have access to everything you do in your life. It's completely gone away from the device now. It's gone into the world around you, and all these cameras are watching everything you do. And so the ability to know what you do, know what your intentions are, know what your desires are, and then take that information and influence you, just like I talked about, with Roy Jones, the liked the tweet, that becomes much more seamless and imperceptible to you. You just end up being charged more for things, or you find out your child didn't get into university, or that job you were expecting didn't come through. Nobody ever tells you why it didn't come through.
Right. It's kind of like what Facebook throttles you, or you mentioned Twitter. You like a tweet that favors the Dalai Lama, your Roy Jones example, and next thing you know that you lose your job. So it really is mass control, and if we go on the current track, you're saying it's mass control by the Chinese Communist Party.
Right, and what we saw, the way the world was changing and the technology was going beyond where our laws could actually govern and ensure that Americans lived a life that had the freedoms that we were guaranteed in our Constitution. And so in order to reframe that, to bring back democracy in a digital sense, that we needed to rebuild the internet. We needed to make data itself secure and encrypted so that you owned your data and only you could determine who had access to that data. That became the equivalent to me, as I was thinking about it, to the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment basically gives Americans the right to stand up to an oppressive government. But if that government has acquired the ability to oppress you in ways that you're not aware of, then you really have surpassed the time when a gun really can defend your freedoms. You really need to own and control your data in a way that ensures that that data is, if it's monetized or used for a profit or used to influence you, you have an ability to know that and have a voice in that regard.
So when I read your paper, you talked about what China's doing, and you talked about the risks if we don't keep up, and then you had a section in there that talked about how do we flip the script. So what should we be doing, knowing that China's developing 5G, trying to take control of all the standards, and at some point everything might run through Beijing and the Communist Party. Even, if you like a tweet or don't like a tweet, you go to the wrong movie, you cross the street the wrong way or whatever. And that is Orwellian, but we have an opportunity, a window here where we can address it, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. And so the idea was essentially to take technology we developed in the Defense Department, technology that we were using to secure Defense Department data and networks, and apply that to a civilian network that allowed everybody's data to be protected. And to invoke the Eisenhower National Highway System, that was ostensibly for national security because it was connected to the Air Force bases during the Cold War, but really it promoted our economy through the trucking industry and allowing trade to develop, interstate trade to develop in the United States. The same idea was envisioned for the 5G network. Not that as was advertised, that I was advocating the government should build the network. What I believed is a private company should build the network, but according to government standards that actually protected the data, and there should be oversight over that company to ensure that America's data is kept secure. So not just American individuals, but financial institutions, industrial companies, everybody that has lost their data, in the past couple decades with the rise of the internet, needed to go back to a level playing field for the individual and the company against these state actors.
So how can we go about that? I know you wrote the paper. It was at the National Security Council. I know it was leaked. I know there was some political turmoil. We face some type of challenge here in the United States to what seems like a very sensible proposal. What do we do about it?
Well, it's really quite simple. The FCC releases a sub-6 gigahertz spectrum. So right now we're trying to build 5G networks in millimeter wave. It's far too, the signal propagates far too short distance. So you need something that can propagate a long distance in order to build a nationwide network. And so we needed to have lower frequencies released to industry so they could build them out. And then industry actually needed to build a secure network, not just a 5G network that was unsecured, just like in our networks today, but a new network that was secure and encrypted. And so, all of this is possible. The cost for something like this is far below what we spend on a carrier battle group, say, today. So it's totally doable. There's plenty of capital in the capital markets if the frequency is released, and the technology's there.
Well, there's absolutely, and right now with interest rates, it's very affordable just from that standpoint. But we talked to Dr. Gil Amelio, who was at one time lead board member for AT&T. He was also the chairman and CEO of Apple. So he knows a little something about this, and he agrees with you. He thinks that the higher frequencies not only are problematic because you won't get to the rural communities with them, but also you be standing in New York and you go from one side of the street to the other side of the street, and your signal could drop dramatically. So you have to be in just the right spot. And then finally, he's concerned, as a PhD in physics, he's concerned about the safety issues the higher the frequency that you get. So he was a staunch advocate for adopting this, but he's not sure that the Defense Department will let go of the spectrum.
Well, and that's, if you look in D.C. at the lobbying landscape, the telco industries have the most powerful lobby here. And so essentially anybody that talks about this is squashed, whether they're in government or out of government. And essentially they have captured the narrative. They say that they're investing more in 5G, and we're going to have 5G, and even AT&T has put fake 5G on their phones to let Americans think that they have 5G, when in reality they don't. We're investing less in 5G than Mexico. No, that could be a good thing, because right now the 5G technology is insecure. So it is a big challenge. We're not stepping up. We're not doing anything right now, but I'm hopeful that eventually somebody will step forward and do something.
One of the things we do in the Economic War Room is we help people weaponize their money. This seems like an issue that people should be weaponizing their money towards. So where they invest, where they spend, where they vote, how they speak up, all geared towards enhancing their lives, yes, but also promoting America's national security and preserving our culture and our Western values. So what kind of things could investors and investment advisors be doing to promote the Eisenhower system for 5G for us?
Well, they could be looking at those companies that are actually looking for secure 5G solutions. They could also of course, stop investing in emerging MSCI Emerging Markets Index, that sends a lot of money to the Chinese. So I think it's a combination of not investing in China and finding those investments that actually see that money go to research and development or technology here in the United States that actually help improve our position with regard to this competition.
Well, I know you've got your finger on the pulse of this 5G issue, and that you're watching it, you're writing books, and you're speaking, you're doing interviews, and so forth. We'd like to continue to bring you back to the Economic War Room as a regular. And as you come up with, if you come up with any specific investments, areas, ideas, or suggestions, please send them to us. We're going to put together an incredible battle plan that explains, based on what you've written, the Eisenhower National Highway System for telecommunications. I think it's brilliant. I think it's the right approach. I think 5G is where the world is headed, and I think we've got to adopt the common sense pro-America policies that you've suggested. So will you come back to the Economic War Room again?
Absolutely, anytime.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you, General Spalding.
Thank you.
So you just heard from one of the real experts. He was at the National Security Council. He's lived and worked in China. He has a PhD in mathematics and economics, and he is a general from the Air Force. He really understands this. I met General Spalding at Maxwell Air Force Base on a Spectrum conference dealing primarily with EMP. He's got a knowledge set that is so wide on all of these issues that are critical to our future. So you need to download the battle plan. You can go to economicwarroom.com and download the battle plan. And if you want to stay up to date on the investment opportunities and ideas, you need a financial advisor. And so we need the name of your financial advisor. If you want to nominate someone to get this training and get this information, go to economicwarroom.com/advisor and register there. Put your name. If you don't have an advisor, we'll try and help find you one. And if you do have an advisor, give us their name. This is Kevin Freeman from the Economic War Room.